Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avasec Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. Join me today to explore the art of defining and managing performance targets in marketing. My guest, Michael Newman, growth marketer and GTM advisor, will reveal his expert insights on adapting goals, tracking progress, and keeping teams in sync. And for you startups facing budget challenges, he's dropping some game-changing advice you won't want to miss. Get ready to elevate your marketing strategy with proven tactics from one of the industry's top minds. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the StrategyCast newsletter on StrategyCast.com. Just like this episode is full of inspiration and a ton of ideas that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I'm thrilled to have Michael Newman join the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Lori. Really pleasure to be here and excited to share some of the insights I've learned over my last 12 to 15 years of marketing, especially when it comes to building a strategy model and a budget model to really guide what you're going to do in the next annual year. It's coming up on that time of year, so I hope these words of wisdom come across well for folks.
Well, it definitely will. We're going to dive into performance targets, right? And
Correct.
Something that I think every CEO, CFO, CRO, CSO, CMO, it's just so much difficulty, especially if you're starting from ground zero, to understand what a performance target should be. Once you have a little bit of history, it's certainly easier. But, as you're planning for 2025, it's likely there are some missed goals that people need to consider. While the macro environment is certainly a factor, there's typically other aspects that limit the ability to manage performance. We're going to dive into that today. Before we get there, you've just given us a great intro. Tell us a little bit more about your experience in this area.
Sure. So for the last 3 to 5 years, I've been leading demand gen functions or chief of staff roles at different companies. And part of that is owning the actual strategy for the overall marketing budget, because demand gen usually consumes quite a bit of that. And so formulating that budget, the outcome of that is the performance targets or the goals that you want to share, not only for you, but for the sales and the partner teams that you're collaborating with, which is an important part of the secret sauce, as you will. And we'll get into that further later on. But once you've done that, outline that broad model, then you can iterate and tweak it as the environmental external factors change.
Yeah, that's great. So what do you consider to be the most important factors in defining performance targets?
Well, there's a couple things. One is, again, having that baseline in place, going into the year knowing here's what I want to do, assuming everything stays, all the assumptions that you made, building that model stay the same. And then the other is really understanding, what could change, what will change, and then being able to be flexible as those things change, so that you can look at, okay, here's based on the budget, here's the goals that I want to get, and breaking that down to your different lines of business or go-to-market motions, whether that's a partner-led, product-led, or sales-led motion. How do you get those targets out to the teams, and then across marketing, across the different channels? They have to have actionable goals at that level so they can measure their own performance, and then work with them to monitor and track that on a more frequent basis than quarterly. It's usually weekly or monthly, in my experience, gets you the best outcomes, so that, again, you're always on track on top of, am I on track? If I'm not, how and where can I look for improvements?
I love that. Now, so if you are established company, you certainly have some year over year, month over month, week over week data that you can pull. If you are that listener today who is starting from ground zero and they're going to launch a campaign, what advice do you have for them about establishing performance targets?
Well, luckily, we're in the age of AI, so you can probably go to your favorite browser and ask it, or go into ChatGPT or some other open source AI model, and ask it for relevant performance metrics, because that data is out there. It will give you a starting point, right, for an industry, for a vertical, whatever you're launching that campaign in, or wherever you're planning to attack in that with that strategy. You can go get that data. If not, then you've got peer networks that you can talk to and get, hey, what have you seen here or there? And they're not going to give you specifics, but they'll give you, percentages or ranges that you can use. Okay, that's my starting point. That's what I know. That's another data input that I've got besides my own historical data to really guide where what I should expect from that campaign or from that overall program.
Yeah, that's great. And we love AI on this show. So thank you for mentioning that. Quite often what we see is that the targets are overshot based on either past performance, product life cycle, low awareness in the market. So people are starting more mid-funnel and it's just not going to achieve the performance targets that everyone expects. How do you recognize that, number one? And then number two, how do you have that tough conversation with the CEO and say, we can achieve this with this, these needs, we can't achieve it as prescribed or defined or budgeted today?
So that's where that weekly check-in is really important to see how am I performing week over week. And it's not, let's say that I'm creating a campaign. My focus is how many opportunities come from that. That's where the real business discussion happens. Leads are okay, MQLs are okay, but it's really opportunities that have to be the outcome that I'm striving for. And if I'm looking at a weekly basis at, are the leads coming in? Are they converting into MQLs? Then that's a good sign. That's a good trend that, okay, I have an opportunity, have the potential to reach that opportunity target. If they're not coming in, which is kind of the indication you're giving here, then you do have to look at, okay, where's the miss? Is it the messaging? Is it the audience? Is it both? And you can dive into that by looking at where you've put the campaign, what the engagement is, and then really understanding, okay, here's what we're going to experiment and test and tweak. And it really is a continual testing and tweaking of a campaign that makes it successful in the long term, because things do change. You may have missed this audience, or they're now valuing this over that. And you have to take that into consideration. And again, luckily, there's lots of tools out there that allow you to do that, bring that learning back into the main campaign, and hit the appropriate channels.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I want to kind of roll up our sleeves in this next segment of the show and really walk through, building the performance model and that base case scenario that you talk about. So you always start with allocations.
Correct. Yeah. So if I'm running a campaign, or actually same thing with the annual budget, I look to see, okay, what channel or what motion is this going to impact the most? Is it a partner focus? Is it direct sales? Whatever that is, I need to break out that allocation accordingly. So let's say it's pretty typical, let's say 80-10-10. So 80% marketing, 10% sales, 10% partner, where they're going to be responsible for taking those campaign assets and put them in the market and generate some amount of activity. I allocate the budget that way. I allocate the collateral that way, and really try and make sure that the team is on track each team is on track of their own goals. With that allocation, then you can understand, again, looking at those weekly or monthly numbers, is each motion on track? Say, for instance, I'm looking at an ABM motion, which is another hot topic these days. Am I getting the engagement not only from the account, but from the buying group? If I'm not reaching that buying group, then it's going to be very hard to reach the ABM goals I may have set out. If I'm not, then I have to come back and talk to the AEs, the SDRs that are involved, the marketing team that might be providing the umbrella coverage across LinkedIn or other display ads environments, and really understand where's the miss. But you can only do that if you're looking at, weekly and monthly trends to see if you're on track for those quarterly goals.
Yeah. And certainly timing is a big question mark there as well. Are you giving it enough time, or have you
Right.
given it too much and you just need to try something different? How do you approach that as a discussion point?
Sure. And that all comes back down to your sales cycle, right? You have to understand, and again, with historical data, it's easy. If you don't have the historical data, you can look at industry data to say, okay, what is my sales cycle? For S&B, it's probably, 3 to 5 month window is where you should see a full cycle complete. So that's good. That's quick. You can make changes there. Mid-market is probably more, anywhere from 5 to 9 months, and enterprise can go out to 18 months. So that's much harder to pivot quickly. But let's say that whatever target you're going after, you have to understand the progressions through each stage of the funnel. So again, S&B, if it's a 3 to 5 month close, I'm going to see traction on leads and opportunities fairly quickly. And I can really understand, okay, is the trend happening? I know it's going to be a build. Is it a slow build or a fast build? But I know it's not going to come out optimal, but it's as long as there's some movement in that direction, that I'm feeling pretty good. And then you can, again, tweak to optimize it. And then if you are wanting to increase performance, again, you go back to the channels, whether underperforming, overperforming, and see how to improve that.
It's we're talking a lot about the top-down approaches, but then
Yeah.
there's the bottom-up analysis and approaches that really need to be talked about as well, and at least be on the table from a discussion point. Walk us through those executions, if you will.
Sure. And that all comes back at the beginning, right? When you're planning this activity, it's more important, I think, from an annual budget model to do this bottoms up, because that's really wanting to see, do I have the capacity to execute the plan that is needed? And this goes back to one of the comments you made. Do I have the resources I need, either the budget or the personnel? So you look at, okay, if I'm going to go create let's say I'm going to go attend an event, and I'm expecting 5,000 leads, not MQLs, just leads coming from that. Do I have the capacity from the programming and the personnel to take those and turn them into MQLs, and then from MQLs into meetings or opportunities? If that's going to inundate the team, well, then how do I stagger that? How do I make sure that I don't, you don't want the python eating the pig scenario, because then it's just going to slow everything else down that comes through there. So you really want to modulate that accordingly. And so you have to look at, again, what's that capacity of the underlying teams, from the ability to outreach to them if they show interest, and the ability for sales to take that opportunity and move it forward.
Yeah, I love that. Certainly, this is all about performance optimization, which
Mhm.
leads to growth, which leads to goals, which leads to more revenue, which leads to more investment, which leads to, market penetration. What is everything that one would need to consider for optimizing and improving their efficiency along the way?
Yeah, and efficiency is such a focus area these days, and so important as we're moving to, or we've been in this for the last couple of years at least, really doing more with less. The only way you can do that is
Yep.
become more efficient. And so the other factors you can look at are, obviously conversions. If I can improve my conversion, then the same dollar input into the market will create more leads or opportunities. Other ways to do that are looking at your average deal value or contract value. What are you doing to help increase that value? Because if you can increase that 10 or 15%, well, then that's fewer opportunities you actually need to deliver, or a less conversion impact you need to have. Nirvana is hitting all three of those together, where you increase the volume, you increase conversion, you increase ACV, and then you get just stellar growth. But usually you only have one or two of those working in tandem. But if you're looking at that, at those kinds of things, that's great. I've been spending a lot of time focused on kind of the bookings area of net new. The same thing is important from a customer standpoint. If I'm trying to help grow upsell or renewals, I need to get that expansion rate higher too. And so if I look at what's the dollar value of each expansion, I need to, what can I do to increase that? Is there a packaging? Is there pricing changes? Are there, different value statements I need to share to really drive that forward? That's going to be a great lever to grow overall ARR as well.
So I want a couple points here that I'd like to make and get your insight on. So we recently did some research for one of our own clients, and they've had very, very flat budgets. And we're typically, achieving over 15 years, 6% year over year growth. Big numbers, with massive numbers of new customers each year too.
Sure.
And lots of revenue, great EBITDA, so on and so forth. The budgets have stalled out since pre-COVID.
Sure.
And what I've learned, and not only through direct experience, but anecdotally as well, is that most budgets are not back to where they are pre-COVID time periods. But the trajectory of goal is still the same. What advice do you have for marketers on how they navigate those conversations with CEOs who now know they can do more with less, but it's going to catch up with them? There's a crunch time
Sure.
where it's going to definitely catch up.
Yeah, so this is kind of symptomatic of the life we've lived, right? You've talked about pre-COVID. If you go back to those time periods, there was lots of money. People could buy all sorts of tools and experiment or pilot with them for a year, and there were a lot of transactions. We saw at the beginning of 2023 where a lot of those transactions didn't really turn into customers. There wasn't the repeat buying, that long-term value wasn't being established. And so people were churning heavily, and this was across many industries, many environments. And so you have to go back and look, okay, what's the important aspect here? Am I trying to build a stream of transactions, or am I trying to build programs that actually generate customers that will buy and buy again? And that's the important thing. So coming back to what's the question, what's the lesson to do more with less? It's really looking at how do I get more customers, not transactions. So if I can get to the point where I'm gonna, with this budget, I can get to X number of customers, and over time they'll grow incrementally. That's a good ARR story. Now, if the goal is bookings, then you have to look at what's the underlying mechanisms for conversion, ACV, et cetera, that get you to that bookings number. And the more with less environment, that does become a challenge when you've got sequential growth, but budget's flat or declining. And the only way to do that is through optimization and having hard conversations with not only the CEO, but with finance and sales. And that's where it comes to having a model that you can show and demonstrate. This isn't a slide. This is a live action model that you can say, look, if I change this, this is the outcome. If I can do this, this is the outcome. And you give options to show, okay, here's the range of things that we can likely accomplish. We go back to the baseline.
Yeah.
You establish that, and then you show a range plus or minus 5 or 10% to show, this is the range of possibility, and here's the resources, again, people and budgets needed to meet that. That just gives a clear picture, and you're not trying to position anything. You're just saying, this is the way our business operates today, and so this is what we can do. I can tweak this, I can tweak that, but I need an input, either dollars or resources, to make it go better or make it go faster here.
Yeah, interestingly, with the analysis that we did with this particular client, we determined that our loyalists were still very, very loyal. And really the issue at hand were bringing first timers through the doors.
Yeah.
And And, the compounding factors are an increase in media cost of 45%.
Yeah.
Or, since pre-COVID. Certainly people have not increased their budgets by that. So we had to really roll up our sleeves and get creative regarding the tried and true approaches that we had taken and said, okay, we're going to have to leave, push some of these aside and open up some new channels for first timers through different media approaches to make sure that we meet the goal.
Yeah, you mentioned the tried and true methods, and that's really what I think we're coming back to is in the last, again, pre-COVID to 2022 timeframe, we really had this just demand pull where there was so much money out there, it was just flowing. We didn't have to do a lot. We didn't have to be creative. We didn't have to be super marketers. We just had to be good enough. And now as money spigot is turned off, we've got to get better at our craft. We've got to go back to those fundamentals, those tried and true methods that create demand over the long term, not in the short term. Because again, that's where you'll get your loyalists or your ambassadors, whatever you want to call them. And again, having historical data, you can go say, where did I find them? Where is that patch of loyalists? And I'll go mine that some more because there's still more out there.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to go back and find them. And that's where having your ideal customer profile very well articulated and not the one that's in the deck that is probably 2 or 3 years old. It's coming back and looking at it, recently and saying, okay, here's where I'm going to target. Here's the tiers within there. And here's where we're going to create alignment across sales and marketing to focus on the same ones. And that also drives efficiency because now your sales team is not chasing a profile that is not going to win or is going to win at a very low rate. And you can come back and really drive success by focusing on those top targets.
Yeah, I love that. The other thing I want to bring up is consumer sentiment. So consumer sentiment right now is hovering, between 72, 77. And this is great information, by the way, to find through, I think, Michigan State is the governing body of consumer sentiment. And they have been for decades. And, everyone looks at that. A good consumer sentiment is 150. So although people report, oh, consumer sentiment's up 2% this week, it's still very, very low, which really impacts people's, consumable spending, if you will. Yeah. And that becomes very, very difficult in a time period where we still have to grow brands. What advice do you have for our listeners today on how they combat that?
So that's a tough one. The consumer market's not my forte. It is something that I am a consumer myself, but most of my focus is in B2B. But we're still selling to humans, right? And so that sentiment is still relevant. And so it really is drawing out their engagement. And the most valuable thing we can get from them today is their attention. And I can't remember who I heard this from, but it rings true that is the currency we're really trying to drive here. Getting their attention, holding it, and turning that intention into something that is valuable for both sides. They're going to get value from either a download or attending a webinar, and we're going to get value because we're going to learn more about that customer or that consumer. And so really understanding their journey, understanding where they want to find value and how that translates is the same thing, whether I'm looking for the best cup of coffee out there or the best automation, AP automation software. I'm still looking for something that I'm going to invest my time to research or explore this. What am I going to get in return, and who's going to make it the easiest for me to enjoy that?
Yeah, that's such great advice there. Thank you for that. One thing that we see quite often is that performance targets are developed after the strategy and before a predictable pipeline, not before. Address that common mistake that leaders are making.
Sure. And this comes back to, again, I've said having a physical model, typically in Excel, it could be Google Sheet, whatever. There's other software out there that does it, but it's something that makes the changes real in real time. It's not, oh, we'll go back and look at this. And then you go back a week and a half and show, here's the updated model in a slide set. You want to have that real time feel to it so that you can understand, again, what are my variables, what are the inputs, and what are the changes that creates. By doing that, you also are having real live conversations with sales or partners, whatever your stakeholders are, and you're coming up with solutions together. You're getting everyone's fingerprints on the solution, which creates more buy-in. And that way, when things have to change, you've already got the big hurdle done. Okay, this is what we agreed to. It's not working. What are we going to do to fix it? And so that's really just so important in these times when, again, there are a lot of external factors driving it, some internal, but whatever we can do to build that alignment, build that credibility to get early on is so important to create those iterations later on. And again, if you've done that model at the beginning, then the targets and the goals just flow from that. You know that if I'm going to grow $50 million this year, well, on average, I need to get 12.5 million per quarter. Am I on track for that or not? If I'm low in Q1, is there seasonality to my business that shows that's going to come back in a later quarter? If not, okay, we either have to replan or we have to come back and say, okay, how do we make that gap up? And really figure out together with all of the constituents, how do we do that? It's not a singular solo mission. It's got to be a joint mission.
Well, I love that. And you mentioned Excel and these tables and models, and you've been kind enough. You're going to share a model with our team, or with our listeners rather, that they'll be able to download. So just take a look at the show notes for that, listeners. And that, is just an incredible gift that you're going to provide. So thank you very, very much for that. What are some of the most common hurdles that you see or mistakes people make in developing performance targets?
Sure. I think it's where do they begin, right? Are they beginning at here's a broad number. I'm going to set my budget to equal to a percentage of revenue or a percentage of bookings. That is a good benchmark, but it's not a good place to start because it doesn't really give you the answer for your business. It doesn't break down those allocations we talked about early on, what across the different go-to-market motions. You have to understand what is that for your business and apply those breakouts early. Because if I'm saying I'm going to base that revenue and off that, I'm going to create, say 40 to 45% contribution to the bookings, that's okay. But if historically I'm doing only 35%, then I'm all of a sudden, I'm going to find 10 points somewhere. How am I going to do that? And so you really have to understand, again, what is the DNA within your business? How do things work? And then apply those parameters to your business. And again, as you mentioned, I'll show how to do that in the template that I've used over the last several roles.
That's fantastic. I love it. Thank you again. Now, with that scenario, who's at the table? Is it the CFO saying or the CEO saying, our investors, there's pressure, we need to get here, and the CFO's just saying, okay, here's what I think we need to do, and then sales and marketing are just kind of going along with the decision? Or, who's making the decision, and then who needs to fight back?
Sure. So a good model starts with an objective, right? Here's the objective. That's where you can really, find the inputs and the parameters that will drive that model. And then you can develop the strategies after that to achieve that objective. But I think it starts with a good, close relationship with FP&A, your finance team, to agree on, yes, this is how the business operates. And here are the important parameters for them as you work on that. And then also your sales leadership, whether you have an SDR team or inside sales or an overall sales ops leader, you have to have a good working relationship with them to, again, align on the numbers. Do we agree that this is the starting point? If everybody comes to the table with their own spreadsheet or their own numbers, it's never going to get pulled together into a consolidated model. And so by working off that same model, it really helps drive the conversation and easily get to alignment. And so then again, it's a team response, not a singular marketing response or sales response, but all of you collectively saying, hey, you gave us a growth target of 35%. Based on the changes we've made, the programs we're suggesting, we think we can get to 28%. We need this amount of budget to get to 35. And being able to do that is great, because then that also helps create an awareness of the overall business. Finance will love that, because now you're talking their language. And then you can go off and start working on the specific strategies with a clear understanding of what's needed. And if you don't get that, then here's what's possible.
Yeah, I love that. I love, this is where we get really competitive as an agency. And we've got a lot of secret sauce surrounding competitive intercept strategies, where we can create larger bumps by intercepting potential customers while they're interacting with the competition. And then just having really strong market awareness campaigns that differentiate and create distinction, leading to why wouldn't you, go with our brand versus the competition. So that, I think, is a very, very interesting discussion that takes time, that takes place at the same time these discussions are happening in order to help achieve the extra 8 points that you just talked about there.
And that goes back to the tried and true or fundamental programs, right? Always knowing what your competition is doing and how you can redirect traffic, because they're gathering people. There's people that have a problem or a similar problem that somebody else is solving. How do you get them to come to you, whether your site or your salespeople or your events, and have that conversation? And so that's part of the strategy and or some of the tactics. And again, I've seen a lot of success being able to show specific differentiation to one competitor or another. It helps tremendously in the organic traffic. And then it also really helps show credibility in the market that you know what your competitor's doing. And that's where, things like battle cards come into play. And, again, a lot of fundamental collateral that we seem to have gotten lately.
Yeah, I love that. Any final words of advice for our listeners today?
Strap in. 2025 is going to be another fun ride.
Yeah.
It's going to be, post-election, post-Fed changes. So all of that is hopefully wins behind us, creating strong tailwinds that will change. And we'll start to talk about funding again versus, reducing budgets. And we'll start talking about growth again versus holding steady. And I think really we've got a lot to look forward to. And if we can put some of these principles in place now, you'll be ready for those iterations as the year ends and you get ready for next year.
That's great, Michael. Thank you so much. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
If you want to reach out, LinkedIn, my profile on there, Michael Newman, is pretty easy to find and has a lot of my information and some resources for you to use.
That's great, Michael. Thank you. And if you'd like to go ahead and contact me, please email me, Lori@StrategyCast.com. And don't forget to visit StrategyCast.com and sign up for our newsletter as well. Michael, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
Great. Have a good day.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.